Hi, fans of high-quality entertainment. I am honored and thrilled to talk again to Matt Williamson from Pop Goes the 60s. First of all, Matt, please, in case a viewer or two doesn't know about your channel, please tell us about your channel.
Oh, thank you, Larry. I'm always a fan of high quality entertainment. I try to provide some of that myself with my channel, Pop Goes the 60s. And my channel is basically, I guess you'd say it's almost half Beatle content, but the other half is devoted to 60s band histories and artist histories. So I spend a lot of time on 60s pop culture, but mostly 60s bands.
Yeah. And unlike me, you do research.
Well, it's research is it's a big word because you can do some minor research is all you need, but I realized when I started the channel that more research was needed to basically dispel a lot of myths that are out there, and some of these myths were really damaging to the careers of some of these artists, I felt, and I thought that wasn't really if I knew information that would dispel that, why not talk about that? So that's always a part of my videos, dispelling some of the myths and some of the fanboy lore that just kind of overtakes some of these discussions.
Yeah. And what I really like about your channel is even if I'm not that much of a fan of a certain artist, like the Fifth Dimension, I still watch the video because I love the history of almost any artist and what they go through and everything and the albums and everything.
Well, it's always a compliment to hear people that say, "Hey, I don't really like this band, but I watched the whole video." And I think that the thing I try to do is I bring in other elements of pop culture going on around the band, which always includes other bands. So none of this happened in a vacuum. Everybody was very well connected and influenced one another. So that makes it easy to spill over into other bands and then, mention some of that too.
Yeah. And I'm sure besides me, I'm sure you get a lot of requests from viewers to do certain artists.
I do, and I always encourage requests. And my biggest request recently is what I'm doing right now, which is Donovan.
That's the one I requested.
You did. And I mean, I was watching your videos, starting a few months back when you were getting into some of these Donovan albums and you were reviewing them. And I thought, oh, he's getting into Donovan. And that kind of made me excited to move him up on my list a bit.
Yeah.
And I had gotten others requested as well.
Yeah. So as of now, part 1 is out, and I'll have a link for it in the comment section below. And when is part 2 coming out? In about a week or so, or?
Well, if maybe Saturday at the earliest. So
okay.
I'm in the middle of working on it. So
Yeah.
We'll see how much I can get done.
So first of all, I'm going to show you what I have so far. And my proudest thing I have is this.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And this is
that. I've never seen that with the sticker on it.
I'm actually going to do a video on this pretty soon. And it's got and Donovan autographed it, and there, an autograph inside, and it's 497 out of 500.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
you just got in there, huh?
Yeah. So I've got in order his debut album.
Mm-hmm. What's been did and what's been hid. Yeah.
Yeah, and Fairy Tale, and I do enjoy those. But if it was just that kind of music he was making throughout his career, I wouldn't be as interested. But I just love the way he changed. And so, I just respect these albums a lot and I enjoy them. And then, of course, Sunshine Superman, Mellow Yellow. This is a different version of it, but it's the same, A Gift from a Flower to a Garden. Mm-hmm. The complete 1967 Anaheim show, which is superb.
Yeah, that's really excellent.
The Hurdy-Gurdy Man. Donovan's Greatest Hits, expanded. Rabbit-Jaggle. Open Road, which is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. Another one of my favorites, Cosmic Wheels, with the. Are we going to talk about the one particular song?
We could.
Okay. And these, I'm really impressed with the early 70s, Essence to Essence.
Mm-hmm.
7 T's, which I love. And then later, Sutras, which is excellent. This one, I know you said you really like. I need to listen to it more because the last time I listened to it, I didn't enjoy it. it was hard to get all the way through it, but it's Sutras. Oh, sorry, Beat Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just got this yesterday, the EP collection.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So I don't want to take over what you've done with your parts 1 and parts 2, but can you kind of tell how you got into Donovan? Or
Well, like my early childhood, I was into a lot of 60s music right off the bat. So I was always playing records as a little kid. And then I would say by the time I was 13, I started to collect music and I was focusing on the 60s. So Donovan was one of the guys that I had heard some of his hits. The first album I bought I was in high school, which was Donovan's Greatest Hits. And I didn't know some of those songs by the titles, but I recognized some of the songs. And I remember I was homesick from high school and it arrived in the mail. And this is the days before the way I would order these albums, or I'd get Goldmine Record Magazine and go through when I'd order it from someplace in the States and it would come to me. And so it was a good place to start, his greatest hits. And then I just started adding album after album.
Yeah. And is there a cutoff point for you with his music?
Well, I find with most 60s artists, the cutoff point is right around 1970. And in Donovan's case, he did this album, the album you mentioned, Open Road, which is 1970. And then there was a little break after that. So the next proper album was 73. So that began his 70s period, which is a little different. And by then he stopped having hits, but he was still touring. And that he was kind of still that hippie vagabond. So you can see him live during that time. He always put on a good show.
Yeah. And we have to talk about the intergalactic laxative. I've heard about that song for years, right? And I really didn't want to check it out until I got into Donovan. And so it was honestly, I'm listening to Cosmic Wheels for the first time. It was honestly a shock to hear him talk, certain words in the song that I won't mention here, but it is, I think it is song wise, I think it's a good song. Lyrics wise, as I've said in videos, sometimes I skip it. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, I ended up buying that album. So that's the first kind of album in his 70s phase. And I kind of skipped that song too. I didn't have a lot of patience for that album, but I always like Cosmic Wheels, and that a bit of a throwback to his psychedelic stuff. And he's always into that astrology side of things. Anyway, he played that up a little bit more in the 70s. He had this kind of guitar that had the stars and stuff on it. But
I found in the late 60s, early 70s, he would experiment, like even with his voice. On some songs, the first time I would hear it, he'd use his falsetto or whatever. It's like, oh, I don't like that. But I would kind of get used to it, and I enjoy it now. But I don't think it's for everybody what he was doing.
Yeah, he often used his voice as an instrument. Like you hear that in Mellow Yellow and the whispering, and his voice as a percussion instrument, a little bit like Lennon did in the song Girl. So he was doing that a lot as well. And, it's not for everybody, I guess, but sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't.
Hey, I like a lot of Yoko Ono's music.
Well, if you like Yoko Ono's music, Intergalactic Laxative shouldn't be too much of a stretch for you.
Okay. I had something on my mind now. I got to remember what it was. Oh, yeah. One thing, even before I was a fan of Donovan, that I always used to hear was that Donovan, in any interview he had, he would kind of brag about he taught John Lennon the finger picking style, right?
Mm-hmm.
And later on, when I became a fan, I watched I think it was on Rolling Stone, the website, and there was an interview, like a video. And he was asked, right? And so he told, but he was also saying that he learned, like you mentioned in part one, he learned the finger picking style from a previous artist, right? And he's just passing it on. But a lot of Beatles fans are kind of bashing him, saying, "Oh, every interview he does, he's bragging about teaching, John Lennon." And I think that's not right, because in any interview, it's probably going to be brought up by the person interviewing him, right?
Exactly. I mean, we hear Paul McCartney says the same stuff over and over. It's because he keeps being asked the same questions, and which is a shame, because these are interviewers who just don't do their homework and are not that involved, and they just kind of get the low-hanging fruit. But Donovan did teach the Beatles that finger picking style, and it's an important thing to have taught the Beatles. I can't think of another thing that any of them were taught in any of their career after that, where they used it in their music so much. And McCartney. So let me just tell the story. The way that Donovan taught the Beatles. So he was in India and Rishikesh with them for about a month. So about the same time Paul McCartney was there. And John, I don't know if John asked him how he did that, but it's not a clawhammer style, but it was getting popular in British folk clubs, and there were certain players that were starting to use this folk revival, and it was centered around this guitar picking, which was very beautiful, actually, and intricate. So Lennon practiced it for like a couple of days, and as Donovan was teaching him, because Paul didn't want to be taught, but what Paul was doing, he was standing around them and kind of walking around them with his guitar, watching Donovan teach him, so that's how Paul picked it up. And Paul picked up some of that for songs like Blackbird and things like that. And Harrison did learn it a bit too, but he never really used it. He stuck to a guitar pick. And so he's playing like on Here Comes the Sun would be an example of his guitar pick style of playing.
Yeah. Just trying to think of what else to ask. I'll edit this. Okay. See, I'm not prepared like you are, Matt, with your sheets and.
Well, I got somebody accused me of there's my Donovan part one, and somebody was giving me a hard time because I was reading.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I mean, there's certain things I do read quotes, for example, if I'm listening off musicians. Imagine trying to do a half-hour video memorizing everything perfectly. I mean, I can't do it. And, so I do need some cheat sheets, but.
And do you even show the sheets, right? Like,
they're out there, and I don't have one. Well, I do have one here. So basically, that Donovan part one was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So this is a very dense 4-page outline. It's not a script really, because it's more of an outline. And what I do is I spend a lot of time writing the outline, and I write it in the way that I speak, so that it's easy for me to memorize, because it's what I usually say anyway. If I were to tell the story, this is how I would tell it. But I do try to, I work really hard at the outline, because if I didn't have this, I would go off the rails. I would you got to stick to the script essentially in order to be able to edit something that's very watchable. That's why you said if you watch The Fifth Dimension and you're not that big of a fan of it, well, I think part of that has to do with the preparation of writing this outline and spending so much time on it, so that you have transitions and you can keep the interest of the viewer from topic to topic within the video. Yeah. So those are the things that I actually enjoy doing the writing part of it quite a bit.
Yeah. I was also going to ask, I guess this isn't all about Donovan, but what video camera do you use, and your setup and everything?
Yeah, I've just got it's a Sony prosumer. This is an old model, actually. Hold on, let me grab it here. I don't even know. It is a Sony FDR AX33. So a lot of phones can do as good of a job or better this particular, I've had this camera for a long time, and I just have never really been interested in upgrading. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could upgrade, lighting, all kinds of things. I'm just too busy trying to put these videos together. And if I was trying to be perfect with lighting and cameras, and even in the editing and the script writing, I mean, these videos would just never come out. You know, I just said, let's get this thing out. If there's mistakes, so be it. Moving on to the next one.
Yeah. So do you shoot in 4K?
I do now. Yeah, I didn't originally because, and this was a decision I made originally because of the fact that it was harder to work on if you saw the timeline of one of these videos which might have 50 snippets of songs, 100 graphics type. When you're using high def, it gets very cumbersome to work. In other words, it can slow the program down, and the upload speed, all that stuff played in, and I just didn't have the time. But I've been doing the HD now, and I've made a few changes because more people watch my stuff on televisions, which I didn't know at first until I looked at my analytics. Yeah. And so, well, maybe I should upgrade this a bit so they can get a little bit of better quality.
Yeah. Can you imagine we're on TV, Matt? Yeah, I just recently got these lights here.
Oh, cool. Some soft lights, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know what I was doing, to set them up and everything. So I use Chat GPT, which I use that. I don't know if you've ever used it, but I use that probably at least 2 hours per day. For about YouTube and medical question. Not that they're, I'm sure they're going to get it wrong once in a while, right? And the only thing I don't like about it is it talks like it's a person when I know it's not a person, it's AI. And they'll say great job or whatever it's about. And if you ask a question, they answer it, and then they want to just keep. Would you like to know, it could continue for eternity.
Yeah, I don't use that too much. But yeah, it's just practicing. There's all kinds of great videos on lighting. And for me, I'm in this room. So over in that direction, I've got two pretty sizable windows that I had to cover up. So the cast on me is a little bit blue right now because I don't have my lighting in this room set up properly. And it's always a problem. Sometimes I need to shoot in the daytime, and I don't always look the best, but it's not about how I look. It's about, I guess, the quality of the presentation. So if it's the information that I'm trying to focus on, so.
Yeah. I guess, I'll change this title. It was going to be just Donovan based, but while you're here, we might as well talk about your whole YouTube career, Matt, and how you decided to do Pop Goes the 60s and the year and everything?
Yes. So I've been on YouTube just over 6 years, and I had my idea initially, I wasn't going to do a channel. In fact, I started writing a book in 2010 that was basically band histories, but in book form. And my background is really as a designer. I'm not a writer. So that book was going to be heavy on the graphics because I thought I could tell the story well, utilizing a lot of graphics. So I started that, and it was going well, but I realized, well, I can't get this published. This is not going to happen. And some years later, a friend of mine was looking to do, she had like a PhD in faith formation, and she had all these people that she was like a spiritual advisor, almost religious spiritual advisor. And she was helping so many people. I said, you got to do a YouTube channel. And over a year or two of trying to get her to do a YouTube channel, I said to myself, maybe Matt, you're the one that should be doing the YouTube channel. And I had actually, people, I've never mentioned this, but I had a bad house break-in about 7 or 8 years ago.
Wow.
And it was in this. So if you remember my old place where I used to live, my old studio, and there was a dining room of my duplex, I was broken into that house. In fact, I was sitting right in that chair when the break-in happened. And long story short,
that's not how you do a break-in. You got to wait till the people aren't there.
Well, it was a strange experience.
Wow.
And
And scary, right?
somebody came in with a gun and a mask and they didn't even see me. I don't know how they missed me. So I jumped the guy, and that started something that I almost lost my life. A
Wow.
gun going off. I better move this gun, and boom, it went off. Blew a hole through my kitchen floor, and my kids were in the house.
Wow.
That's how close it came. So anyway, that whole experience. I live in a nice neighborhood that people care about. So this is very unusual. This was people that went to the wrong house, basically. And these guys were idiots, but there was 5 of them. And because there was such interest in the community, I thought, well, I'm going to do a video on this. And I had a video production background already. So I never sat in front of the camera. I was always the guy with the clipboard behind the camera, barking orders to people.
Yeah.
So in this case, I did about 4 videos on this, and it culminated with the day I went to court and these guys got put in jail. And that told me that, well, Matt, you can speak on camera. So that was one of the good things that came out of that. And that was in 2017. And then I started the channel 2 years later.
Yeah. Wow. And what was the first artist you covered, if you remember?
Yeah, I do. It was Peter and Gordon, of all people.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, because my wife Heather, we were sitting, it was a cold winter day and the fireplace was going, and we talked about, so she had Peter and Gordon album that I gave her. So I had an extra. So we wound up listening to that a lot because she didn't have a lot of albums. And I said, well, maybe I would do these guys first. So we kind of talked about it. I kind of said, well, this is how I would do it. So I would kind of practice on her a bit. And I would sometimes have the camera going with that. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But so that was my first Peter and Gordon. So it looks a little different than the way I do them. In fact, I haven't watched it since I uploaded it, but kind of don't want to. But
Yeah. And as we all know, when we have YouTube channels, there's you get a lot of nice comments, but there's some negativity. How have you changed your attitude towards getting like nasty comments? Like, did they used to bother you when you first started, or it didn't? Or
well, I haven't changed my mind, and if I were a dictator, those people would be eliminated. But no, actually, what happened, which was very strange, my first, I would say, 2 years, I had a lot of trolling, and for some reason, a lot of that just kind of melted away. So now I don't get so much trolling as I get, wise guy comments, stuff like that. And it doesn't bother me much. It doesn't bother me. Like sometimes they're actually funny.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I just leave them there because I'm sure other people might get a laugh out of it. But you know how it is. People correct you on you got a hair out of place, or this wire is showing on your desk, or you mispronounced that word wrong. And you know how it is, man. It's really those are the people that really miss the point of what people like you and I are doing here. I mean, you are an entertainer. You've been doing this for 20 years, and you've got a great following. You've got a mix of music and comedy.
But I'm not a professional.
Well, I would say that you are. But the thing is that people have unrealistic expectations even from professionals. And, we're trying to find our little niche here, and some people just aren't very helpful. Others, however, are, though. And I'm sure, like you, I've built a really good viewership that supports me, and those are the people that I'm aiming at.
Yeah.
The people that have a problem with one thing I say or an opinion they don't agree with, which happens a lot, and they just go away anyway.
Yeah.
How dare you say that about Paul McCartney's Ram album? How dare you?
How dare you have your own thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Larry, can we like everything? No, of course not. So that's what makes some commentary interesting, the things that you don't like. And it's usually pretty respectful. I mean, sometimes I have a little bit of fun with it, but I'm trying to have a little fun along the way here. Kill me,
Yeah. My favorite is if I do like a top 10 Beatles songs. somebody will say, "Where's Here Comes the Sun?" It's not in my list.
It's funny how most people, I mean, this is kind of new for people, I think, that this idea of what are the best.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
spent a lot of time on my channel creating criteria so you can have the conversation.
Yeah.
And this started with my discussion of like psychedelic music. And I found it incredibly, I was fascinated by how quickly a discussion would devolve. Basically say, well, my psychedelic dick is bigger than your psychedelic dick. You know, and they had, well, what makes a song psychedelic? And nobody could define it.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, let me define this. So there you can start having the discussion. And then it's not really adversarial, because if you agree on the criteria, well, then you can kind of have the discussion, as opposed to, you know, I was accused when I did my top 10 Beatles best songs. A woman said, you know, well, Matt, these aren't the best. These are just your favorite. I'm like, look, honey, this is not my favorite. You know, I mean, and you have to, you feel like an idiot having to explain.
Yeah.
And, but some people, quite honestly, they don't understand that, or they actually think that their favorites are their best songs. So in other words, their only criteria is what they themselves like, which is hardly the criteria enough to have a discussion on. So, I mean, some people just can't go there. And okay, well, that's not where I'm going. I'm going to have a discussion with some criteria here so we can actually say something important about it, and not just like, I love it, or I like it, or you're stupid, or, you know.
Yeah.
But that's how it gets oftentimes. And that's one of the reasons I started this channel, was to have those discussions. But invariably you do get the people that just want to essentially sabotage your work and try to derail you in any way. And sometimes they have wonderful comebacks like, well, that's just your opinion. So, I mean, yeah, well, whose opinion would you like me to say? Yours? Well, apparently they would in many cases. So, yeah, I mean, and I do see on your channel, I mean, you have some real winners, and
Yeah.
you talk about that, you have episodes. And I mean, every YouTuber could do videos where they have their most crazy people that give them a hard time. And, you know, it's just part of the job.
I especially love, you know, you make a 10-minute video, and all the person does is comment about something not related to the video at all, right? Just some complaint.
Right. Or what I hate is that they'll say, why didn't you cover this or that? I'm like, dude, I covered it. And weren't you watching? I got a video you should watch. It's the one you said you just watched. Watch it again, because I covered that. So people, you know, I mean, maybe they're distracted, it's on the background or whatever, but why would you go to the extent to do that? But yeah, it's amazing what people will write. But I found, you know, a lot of the goofy ones I just maybe won't respond to, because it just can't go anywhere. You know, and just try to put the effort into people who are more supportive and are actually creating an actual discussion that's worthwhile.
Yeah. And I noticed, I think you're at 80-something thousand subscribers. Is that right?
I went over 80. Yeah.
So at some point in the coming, I don't know, year or two, you're going to reach 100,000 subscribers, Matt.
Well, I hope so. I keep growing, and I do find new people that say, I just found your channel. So I love hearing that. And now after 6+ years, I've got 6+ years of videos they can kind of binge on if they want. So that's always nice to have in the back pocket. So they got stuff they can delve into while I'm working on the next video.
Yeah. So after Donovan, without giving away what the next artist is, can you kind of mention some artists that you might be talking about in the next year or two?
Well, I can. I basically have a schedule set for this year, and it's pretty aggressive. And I can give you a couple names, because there's always a potential I won't do them this year, or I'll move somebody up on the list for whatever reason. And I'm usually working on 5 or 6 videos at one time in various stages. And sometimes what will happen is, like, I'll come across a video on YouTube, or an interview of somebody, I thought, okay, this is really good information. I got to take notes here. So then I transfer that to kind of an outline. And sometimes I just get excited about it. I'll do that band first. So the next one I'm going to do after Donovan, I think, well, within the next month or so, I want to do Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66. And this is a group that up through into my early 30s, I probably never would have given the time of day, although I knew who they were and knew maybe a couple songs. But starting as I got older, I really started listening to this group, and it's Brazilian bossa nova style. So Sergio Mendes, he's about the Beatles age. He was trying to get this going in the States, and nobody was really interested. He's working in jazz circles, and jazz only goes so far. And then he decided, well, why don't I add two hot chicks and sing it in English?
Mm-hmm.
And there you go.
Yeah.
And talk about, and one of the things I'm going to talk about Sergio Mendes is the very fine players that they are. I've been gravitating more toward the very fine instrumentalists in 60s music. And I'm going to try to tackle a couple of those this year. The other group I'm going to be doing is the Pentangle. And that is, and two very good guitarists, Bert Jansch and John Renborn. So I'll be covering them and talk about great players. Oh man. Yeah. So those are two that I'm kind of doing for myself. Although the Pentangle has been very much requested.
Yeah. And going back to Donovan, he always seemed to have such excellent musicians working on his albums too, right?
Yeah, and I do cover that. I was going to cover that originally, but I thought, you know what? I really should cover the musicians he surrounded himself with, because they are some really good players that a lot of people are going to recognize. And I wouldn't have known some of these players were on there. They may just play on a couple of tracks per album, but some names like Jack Bruce, Jimmy Page, as people know, although that's been overstated in some cases. Because he was a well-known session guy. But other guys like Danny Thompson, the double bass player, he was in Pentangle, highly regarded bass player. He's on a lot of the tracks, and on the album you picked up earlier, that box set, The Gift from a Flower to a Garden, where Donovan uses more of a jazz backing. Yep. And that oftentimes requires an upright bass player, and Danny Thompson is one of the best. So yeah, those are some examples of Donovan using guys that weren't the typical LA session crew that, quite frankly, I've had my fill of.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a great question for you that I just thought of, Matt. So what is one artist that you covered that you thought, you would do really well with views, but it was disappointing? And the opposite of that, what's one artist that you did that did a lot better than you were surprised with the views for it?
Yeah, that happens pretty regular. Okay, yeah. So one that I did, this was a couple of years ago. I was going to do Cream, but I realized I had to tell the story before Cream prior to that. So the group before Cream, Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, was the Graham Bond Organization. So I didn't call this video Cream Part 1. I called it The History of the Graham Bond Organization. And surprisingly, that did really well. And then the next video was Cream, which did phenomenally well.
Yep.
And I'm like, wow, I didn't expect that to go as well as it did. So the next major series I started not long after that were the Beach Boys. And I figured, wow, this is going to really duplicate what I did with Cream. It did not. The Beach Boys video, which is maybe one of my best series I ever did. I spent like 2 years on it.
I love that. And I've become a huge Beach Boys fan in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, their late 60s stuff is so good. And what I realized after doing the Beach Boys and spending so much time telling that story, which ended, I kind of tell it up to about 1973, roughly speaking, was that the Beach Boys, part of the reason the Beach Boys faltered in the late 60s is because they weren't guitar based. The style of rock music was Cream starting in 67, and there was no looking back. And you can track that through into the 70s, into Zeppelin, to Sabbath, to Boston and on. And the Beach Boys really didn't play that kind of music at all. So they became a niche even then. And I think they're a niche now, based because I've got a pretty wide variety of viewers. And I thought that the Beach Boys series I did was underperformed. And because it's a 6-parter, so that's a lengthy one. So I did basically part 1 goes up to 64. 1965 has a standalone video. 66 has a standalone video. That's with Pet Sounds and Good Vibrations. And then the Smile era, 67, has a standalone video. And then I kind of do 68 to 71 in its own. So of all those, I think the lowest views is the Pet Sounds 1966 with Good Vibrations one,
Wow.
which is the era everybody won't shut up about.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of myth building. And so it was, and I bust a lot of myths through that Beach Boys thing, and which is why if you go to any Beach Boys Facebook page, where you won't find my work anywhere on the Beach Boys. Nowhere. And I know because I was very in tune with many of these because I used it, some of this, and I wanted to know what people were talking about in the couple years leading up to it. So I knew what areas to cover. And so I'm very interested in what fans think. And because I wasn't a Beach Boys expert. And I'm certainly not one of these holy worshipers of Brian Wilson, where, I just don't buy into that. I think that's a load of bullshit. And I said so in the video. And so that's kind of where, that's why I haven't hit 100,000 subscribers yet, because a lot of people don't want to hear that. And I find that the Beach Boys, that topic in general, which is very much becoming even more of a niche, even a smaller niche, is very insular. And if you hear how they treat, Mike Love, and it's like, okay, fine, like I mean, I don't know any of these people, I don't have anything. There's nothing in it for me other than to tell the best history I can. And part of the history now is this adoration of Brian Wilson and the making Mike Love out to be the devil, and this is all very interesting. So I think that needed to be told in the story. Some people don't want some of that told.
Yeah. And, becoming such a big, I've got all of their albums now, I think Mike Love, his vocals throughout a lot of the Beach Boys discography were really good,
Yeah, if you want to talk about a guy that doesn't get any credit at all, it's Mike Love. And I was talking with my son. My son is a musician, and he's song composition and a singer. He has done barbershop quartets, or he has done Beach Boys songs. So we were talking about it one day. He said, Mike Love's bass voice is really important in the Beach Boys sound. And we talked about this for some time. These are the type of things that won't get talked about. And they just, in an effort to make Brian Wilson into a genius, part of the reason people do this is so that they are genius adjacent. They want to be the ones recognized or known for recognizing genius. And that gets very, very tedious and self-serving. And if all you're going to say is, Mike Love doesn't deserve any money and he should just take the money and shut up and not say anything. I mean, that's really childish. So yeah, you're right. Mike Love does have, there wouldn't be a Beach Boys if it wasn't for Mike Love. Brian Wilson could have never got up on stage without a guy like Mike Love fronting it in the early days. And the fact that nobody wants to say that doesn't mean it isn't true.
Yeah. And he gave the best Rock Music Hall of Fame speech ever.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, Love, I don't understand why he felt the need to do that. And there's plenty of negative things you can say about him and anybody really. Yeah, but I mean, that's one of the more memorable.
Have you read his book?
I have, yeah.
His book is really, it's good, right?
Yes, his book is essentially, I think it's told rather even-handedly, but the book is designed to answer some of the negative press he's gotten over the years, actually. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think he tells it rather honestly, because he allows other people to quote it. But, some people just don't want to they don't want to give him any credit at all for anything. And I did use that book as one of my sources when I did my video series, and it was very helpful.
Yeah. Couple more questions. So, of course, you love a lot of 60s music. Do you like any of the, heavier rock like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin? Were you ever into any of that or?
Well, I went through a Zeppelin phase like most teenage boys do, I guess.
I'm
And
still in that phase, man.
I've always liked Zeppelin, and being a little bit of an amateur guitar player, how can you not emulate some of Page's playing? I think John Paul Jones is a great bass player.
Yeah.
I never liked Sabbath. I've always hated Ozzy Osbourne's voice. I never liked
I'm going to
heavy
get
metal.
comments now.
I never liked heavy metal, and Sabbath was one of the ones I hated the most because I thought, I mean, say what you will about Tony Iommi, but I always thought that some of the guitar riffs, they mirrored the melody, and you don't do that. It's not like the Beatles guitar riff. The melody isn't the guitar riff. That's how they're basically the Trogs of the 70s, not very talented. However, the sound they created was incredible, and they were super influential. So, I mean, I'm going to give Sabbath their due. I just never really liked them. And there's some songs I like. As a kid, I never liked Kiss. I thought I'm being marketed to. I never liked that.
Yeah.
So the harder stuff in the 70s, I didn't care for. I mean, I love Bad Company. I love Free. I love Jethro Tull. Some of the prog I liked. I like Boston. The stuff that was on the radio. So, I mean, I got a pretty wide variety of things I like.
Speaking of prog rock, here's an idea. You could start another channel called Prog Goes the 70s.
Prog Goes the 70s. Well, I do dabble, obviously when I do a band history of a 60s group, oftentimes like Jefferson Airplane, they spill into the 70s or Donovan, like you said. And I do get, I get requests for 70s bands, 80s bands, 90s bands. I have to say, well, this is called Pop Goes the 60s, so I'm not going to probably do a 90s band.
Yeah.
But it is kind of nice to sometimes maybe do something a little outside of the 60s, just as kind of what I call a palate cleanser, So
yeah,
I don't think I'm going to do a 70s channel. I might drop a 70s artist in here or there, but I have kind of, at the end of 10 years or 10 years of doing this, I will see where we're at and see if I want to keep doing it. I mean, there's certainly some 70s artists I would love to do.
Yeah.
Because I have some my collections doesn't stop at the 60s,
Yeah. Okay, so we'll end this with, I'd like to know maybe your top 5 Donovan songs. I've just got 4 here. My top 4 so far that I've heard are Least, I Like You from Cosmic Meals. I think that is one of the most gorgeous songs ever. There Is an Ocean, and from Open Road, Curryland, which is almost sounds like that's the other thing about Donovan is I think in the very early 70s he even did a reggae type song, and Curryland almost sounds like new wave-ish.
Yeah, he does have a way of kind of branching off into these other areas that you would call like maybe kind of punky or reggae, or There's a Mountain is obviously kind of a calypso type of song, and he's really well-rounded, and because he's just one person, it always kind of he always sounds like himself. He's unmistakably him.
And I think the other thing about him, the feeling I got from him is he's just so confident with what he does, right? He's so sure of himself.
Yeah, when you see him on stage, even in his very earliest period, when he's like 19 years old, he does command the stage, and he knows what he can do, and he knows how to handle the audience. So I was always impressed with that. And that's why most of his entire life, it's only been him and a guitar on stage, with some minor exceptions. I've seen him with a full band once, maybe twice, but he can do that. And very few people can do that with all the different stuff he's got. But my favorite songs, I wasn't really ready for that question, but I would say one I still love. Where Your Love Like Heaven is still a
Yeah.
favorite of mine. Another favorite that I never get tired of is from his second album, Fairy Tale, called A Summer Day Reflection Song. And that's got an extra guitar by Sean Phillips in there, which I love, but it's getting kind of in this little raga period. Let's see, what else do I like? On Open Road, I like New Year's Resolution.
Yeah.
That's a song. In fact, that's he was working in the studio, the same studio McCartney was working in when Paul was doing his solo album, first solo album. So that song's a little bit about that, but a great song.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking around here. I've got some Donovan stuff out to jog my memory. As far I still like Hurdy Gurdy Man as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just love everything about that song. The solo, the way he sings it, the tambura in the background. And what else have we got here? Some more obscure. Oh, Guinevere from Sunshine Superman. That was that song. When I heard that song, like, whoa, this guy is really a serious artist. And that Sunshine Superman album is really the first album of its kind. The first really psychedelic album, I think. Yeah. Was that 5 or was that 4?
Yeah. So, and what would be your number one favorite album?
Oh, that I don't have an answer for. I think that the album I've played more in recent years, Mellow Yellow is the album I kind of go back to because he does get jazzier there. It's like straight jazz in some cases. And but since your videos, I started getting back into Open Road, which is basically a straight rock album, which is the only album of his first 9 albums that's like that. So I think that's notable, and he does a nice job of it too. He's basically playing in a trio.
And the other thing that I didn't kind of know with your part 1 is Alan Klein, the greatest manager of all time.
Yeah, good old Alan Klein. He where the money is, his fingers will be in the pot. And Donovan speaks pretty highly of him, actually. Klein, we know what he did in the Beatles, and he was damaging to the Beatles in the sense that he killed the goose that laid the golden egg, which means he came between Lennon and McCartney, and for which Beatle fans should never forgive him. But he had a good way of making money. He understood how to get money out of record companies, which is what he did for Donovan. And that's why Donovan, I think, really spoke highly of him. Now, the other thing is that Donovan wasn't a band. He could pocket all the money.
Yeah.
So what he would get in 1967 for a show at the Hollywood Bowl would be the same thing Cream would get, typically. I mean, this is all negotiable. But he didn't have to split it with other members. So that afforded him more wealth, I think, since he wrote all of his stuff, so he did really well.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Matt. This was very enjoyable. And I hope everybody checks out Pop Goes the 60s and subscribes. And any final words? This is where you give me compliments, Matt.
Well, Larry, I must say that I'm very thrilled to be on your show once again. And
stop it.
I always and I appreciate, because you were one of the early supporters of Pop Goes the 60s when I came on the scene.
Yeah.
So I'm always grateful to you for that, and always stuck with you and watch your stuff. And I've seen your channel grow as well. And you've got a second channel, so I appreciate you asking me on.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Matt, and we'll talk again sometime.
I hope so. Take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye.